So welcome all to this next discussion. My guest here is a writer who is in latest book, The Comfort Book, which, by the way, was an instant Sunday Times #1 bestseller, writes the following. Don't worry about being cool. Never worry that what the cool people think. Life is warmth. You'll be cool when you're dead. Head for the warm people, head for life. So warmly welcome to Helsinki Book Fair, Matt Haig.
Thank you. It's very nice to be here, and thanks for having me. And it's an honor, and I'm looking forward to this chat.
So the Comfort Book, of which the quote was published this summer, and it's actually not yet available in Finnish. But I have to ask, why do we need the Comfort Book right now?
I always write the book I most need to read at that point in time, and I wrote this. I started writing this last year in 2020, just as in the UK, everything was starting to go COVID crazy and the first lockdown was happening. And the last thing I felt like writing was an intense, dark new novel or anything. I just wanted to write words of reassurance for myself primarily. Because it's not a case with me that I write exactly what I'm feeling. I'm often writing what I want to feel or what I want to be told. So that was the case with this book. I wanted to write a book that reminded me of, perspective and bigger picture and self-acceptance and all those things. So it was very much a book from this era, and I had no long-term plan to write it. I'd just finished writing The Midnight Library, and it just felt natural. And it was also very nice to write something that was formless, that didn't have a beginning, a middle and an end, and that because my mind was very scattered, it was quite calming just to know that each page was its own complete little island of text. So and it was a kind of self-therapy for me, and hopefully other people who are stressed out get something from it too.
Well, it says something that it was an instant bestseller, that we actually needed the comfort. So thank you. So then if we talk about reading, in your book, Notes on a Nervous Planet, this one, I have your books, by the way, in English because I'm too impatient to wait for them to be translated. But in Finnish, this is Huomioita neuroottiselta planeetalta. You say in this book that reading is love in action. What do you mean by it?
Okay, well, in that context, I meant that reading is, primarily about connection. There's a big myth about readers, that readers are these antisocial, introverted people who are reading a book because they're retreating away. I feel like books are a way for a deeper connection. It's kind of how minds connect. It's about how we empathize. It's about, in the sort of broader sense, it's about a kind of love for each other, because it's about connecting with something outside of ourselves. So, reading is love in action. That was just my grand way of trying to express, the empathy that's involved, the connection that's involved, and in a way, the socializing that's involved, because books are a kind of socializing, but just it's kind of a deep conversation you're having between your mind and the words on a page. There are other things that can do this too, other art forms, but I genuinely believe books can at their best offer unique insights and understandings, and make you see the whole human sometimes. Like we're in the age of social media, we're very much in a very judgmental age, and the age of a quick opinion, and the age of sort of taking sides. And certainly novels at the best, and non-fiction to maybe a lesser extent, they can actually show a more complete, more complex view of life. So in that sense, I think books are more necessary than they've ever been.
What kind of books do you yourself read?
All kinds. I'm very eclectic. I've got a very I've got a very mixed taste. I read a lot of non-fiction. I read a lot of history. Last year, when I was writing my comfort book, I was reading a lot of philosophy. So I was reading the Stoic philosophers. I was reading the sort of 2,000-year-old stuff from Marcus Aurelius. I like a biography. There's a book I'm reading at the moment is very light and fun. There's an English actor called Miriam Margolyes, and she's 80 years old, and she's had this most eclectic, crazy, wild life, and it's just very fun listening to that, reading that, sorry. And yeah, fiction-wise, I'm all over the place, from like Stephen King and Margaret Atwood to Sally Rooney, all kinds. And yeah, I mean, children's books as well. I still dip into children's books, Tove Jansson or Roald Dahl, or there was a writer called Essie Hinton who I liked a lot as a teenager, who was always my comfort read, who wrote a book called The Outsiders, which was made into a film. I think it was one of Tom Cruise's first films. And that was a very sort of important book for me at the time. One of my all-time favorite books, a book I would say that possibly changed my life in some ways, was a book called As I Walked Out One Midsummer Morning by Laurie Lee, who was an English writer who basically was writing about his life in the 1930s when he left his home in the English countryside to busk and earn enough money to get a ferry to Spain. And he was walking around Spain on the eve of the Spanish Civil War. And it just, when I read that at an influential age, it made me want to just travel the world, experience life, meet people. So again, going back to this idea about books or this, for introverts and a sort of retreat from the world. For me, the most life-changing books have sent me in the opposite direction, made me want to go out and embrace life. And yeah.
Did I hear you right? Did you mention Tove Jansson?
I did, yes. The movie.
Great. She's a Finnish writer, and we love her. Yeah.
And exactly, and for adults too, the summer book and things like that. Yeah, she was great. And I remember finding her stuff so dreamlike and atmospheric, and it was a character. There's a lot of, because I'm obsessed with sort of mental health themes, and there's a lot of subconscious sort of mental health themes in the Moomins. Like there's a character of the Groke who's just kind of almost like depression, who is sort of dark.
Yes.
Yeah, and no, it's very beautiful. It's one of the the best writers. I think the most timeless writers are the ones that have somehow managed to create a unique world that you can almost sort of step inside at any point, and it's more than normal fiction. It's like they've actually created something for us to live inside for a while, and she's definitely the archetype of that.
You have created a lot of versatile, worlds. You have written books for adults and children, and fiction and non-fiction, memoir, love affair, whatever. When and how did you become a writer?
My first book was when I was 26 years old, and that followed. I'd had a breakdown in my 20s. I became very ill, very suicidal. And when I got better, I literally couldn't have gone out to work in an office at that point. Not because I hated the idea of working in an office, just because I had such agoraphobia at that time. It was literally physically difficult for me to go and work. So, and yet we had no money. Me and my girlfriend were in debt. And so I had to do something. And I had the stupid idea that I could make money from writing, which eventually worked out, but at the start it did not work out. And so because I wrote a book, and then it was 2 years before it was published when I got the smallest amount of money for it. And I had to do lots of other things. Me and my girlfriend at that time, we were running a sort of freelance PR company and doing different bits. But I was still quite ill, and so I was writing gave me a sense of the future. It gave me a sense of sort of forward momentum. And I think it was quite therapeutic for me to write with a kind of ambition of getting published. yeah, it just sort of came almost impulsively then. But it's very strange because before that age, I wouldn't have had the confidence to be a writer. So it really took me to have a breakdown and recover from a breakdown to actually go for it. Because I'd, as I said, I'd sort of run out of options in terms of the world of work, but also, even though I was kind of mentally ill, I had a sense of confidence in the sense that I'd overcome suicidal depression, which at the time felt impossible. So I had a kind of feeling like, oh, I can do impossible things. And so next to that, having a book published seemed like a lesser goal to reach. So I thought, oh, I can do that. So, and I was very forward thinking. So I didn't mind about all the rejections and everything. I just kept going. It was all part of the process. I think it'd be very different if I was doing it and starting now, but in my 20s, I had that sort of drive, which got me through.
So the reason to stay alive is in Finnish, Syitä, pysytellä elossa, and it's just being published in Finnish. And it's non-fiction book. It was a #1 Sunday Times bestseller and was in the UK top 10 for almost like a year. And it starts like this: this book is impossible. So, well, what happened? It is possible. It's in Finnish even now.
Yeah, well, I meant, because I didn't believe that I'd get to an age where I'd be able to be there writing that book. I didn't believe I'd be a writer. I didn't believe there were so many impossible things about that book, and yet it exists. And it's kind of like, I suppose that's the message of the entire book in Reasons to Stay Alive. It's about questioning your own perspective when you're in those low moments, when you're at the bottom of the valley and you can't see in front of you, to realize that there is a sort of wider world of time and space out there. And in a way, Reasons to Stay Alive, even though it's seen as a self-help book, I don't really see it as self-help book. It's me older writing to a younger version of me about life and staying here and all of that stuff. Yeah.
One Finnish reader commented on that book that he likes your writing because you are not afraid of writing directly how it feels to be anxious or depressed. Was it scary, or is it scary to talk about personal mental struggles?
It can be, because, everyone nowadays sort of says they're okay about mental health and they understand mental illness and stuff. But I think that can stop as soon as you get super honest about things you've done or things you've felt, it can make people uncomfortable. I mean, a lot of mental illness, isn't pretty. I mean, in my own case, I turned to alcohol a lot. I did some stupid things to self-medicate. There's parts of it are ugly. Parts of it are ugly, and I feel like it just felt the right time to talk about it. I think it would have been harder like 10 years before, as I was actually recovering. It took me about 10 years before I had the strength to write. And I needed to feel very different to the person I was writing about as well, I think.
I think you have a unique way, even though the subjects are very serious, like, depression and anxiety, you also, talk about them with humor. Is it appropriate to have humor, or is it even necessary when we are talking about these things?
Well, for me, it's just an honest experience of how it felt. I'm not trying to belittle anything. It was a horrendous experience, and I still get depression and anxiety, and I've been through a bit of a bad patch recently. But when I experienced that, it feels like a kind of very black comedy, because it's, one of the key ingredients of comedy is the fish out of water, the person in a new place and who doesn't know, where he is, the elf who's in New York, or, whatever. And so with mental illness, you're in the same place, but you feel like you're an alien. You feel like you're somewhere else. So everything has a kind of surreal, almost humorous thing. If it wasn't so painful, it would be painfully funny. And so it just, always felt like that. You know, for instance, I think humor's there for a reason. We have humor not for the good times. You know, there are probably as many jokes at a funeral as there are at a wedding. We have humor to, you know, as our coping mechanism, and it's a way. And I think if you've got a slight humorous touch to it, you can actually say a lot more. The last thing I needed to read when I was depressed would have been a very good academic, dense, serious book about depression and suicide. So I'm always aware of that. I'm always aware of what you can actually take, what you can actually cope with if you are in that low place. Because often tone is very important. It's not just the subject of what you're writing about, it's how you're writing about it. And I think that's one of the reasons why I have short chapters and lots of white space around things, because it just makes it easier. And you can actually, you know, you're not compromising what you're wanting to say, but you are thinking about how you're saying it to make it palatable and a bit more universal. So I definitely, I'm always a bit reader aware. You know, I'm always aware of who could be reading it.
The previous book of yours was published in Finland. In Finnish was the Midnight Library. In Finnish, it's Keskiyön, kirjasto. And it was also a huge international bestseller. And it's also one of my favorites among your work. It's a book about finding new possibilities in life, even after, you know, you have been feeling empty and meaningless and so on. Is it almost like a fiction sequel to Reasons to Stay Alive?
Kind of. I mean, yeah, it felt fresh because I'd never explored mental illness in a fictional context. And I think one of the reasons that the main character is female, not male, is because I just wanted to clearly, you know, show the world I wasn't writing about myself. And I wanted it to be clearly, you know, a character who wasn't me. But at the same time, in a way, that gave me a green light to put a lot of personal autobiographical stuff, certainly in the early section. The idea of burning a book of regrets, which happens in the Midnight Library, was the central thing about that. You know, something because it doesn't help anyone if you spend your life full of regrets, full of kind of wallowing, full of looking back. It certainly doesn't help you, and it doesn't help anyone else, and it's not very useful. So I wrote this book about that, really, more than just about, I mean, the central character does have depression, and suicide is the sort of trigger for the whole plot. But I don't know if it's, you know, quite a mental health book in the way Reasons to Stay Alive is. It's more about that notion we all have in the social media age that there are other better lives we could be living, that there are different universes we could be in. Everyone seems to have it better than us. And this happens at any stage. You know, I used to get this when, you know, I was starting out as a struggling writer thinking, oh, if only I was a published writer. But then you get the things you wished for, and you still have exactly the same feelings. So it's a brain thing. It's not a life thing, you know. So I wrote this as a way to deal with that.
Okay. So then there is the famous mouse, this one, that first appeared in your book, A Boy Called Christmas, which is about to be made to a movie in like a month. So a mouse called Mika, in Finnish, it's hiiri nimeltä Mika. What is the difference in writing to children or adults? And do you prefer one or the other?
I probably do. You know, if I had to choose, I mean, I certainly, my main career is writing for adults, and that's where my money comes from and everything else. But I think I actually enjoy sometimes writing for children more, because they're good readers. Like, what I mean is, when people talk about writing for children, you think about what you're not allowed to say. You're not allowed, you know, your sex and violence and everything. But actually, children have broader imaginations. So you can actually, I feel it's more freeing writing for a child, because if you're writing something that's a bit fantastical for an adult, you have to really justify the fantasy. Like in Midnight Library, I have to talk a lot about quantum physics, and I have to talk a lot about this. With children, it's not that they will believe it, but they are so willing to go with the daydream. They will just so willing to go with trolls and talking mice and everything else. So, but it makes you feel like a child again when you write it. So I think I've learned more from writing for children than I have from writing for adults. And actually, when I write for adults, like when I write something like Midnight Library, I Have to Stop Time, I'm trying to pretend I'm writing a children's book in a way. I'm trying to just sort of ignore all that adult stuff about making everything super realistic or, you know, believable, and actually to put a bit of a dream world in there too.
So A Boy Called Christmas is coming out as a movie in November. So next month. Are you excited to see your books being turned into movies, or is it, you know, does it look like your book?
Yeah, no, it doesn't look exactly like my book, but in some ways it looks better than the book. I mean, they've done such an amazing job of the film. It's, for one thing, like when you're writing a book, you don't have to think too much about what it all looks like. You can leave a lot to the reader. When they're making a film, they have to think about every single detail. So although some of the, you know, it's obviously set in Finland, only some of it was filmed in Lapland. Some of it, there is, you know, a lot of the sort of nature stuff is filmed in Lapland. A lot of it was filmed in Prague, in the Czech Republic. And they built in Prague this elf village with wood. So it's not all computer generated. A lot of it is real. They built this elf Finnish village in the far north of Finland, which was in Prague, and it was boiling hot weather because it was July. So they had all this artificial snow. So what's been nice about it hasn't been saying, oh yeah, they've done it like my book. It's been like seeing the new things that they've created that are different to the book, and they've created something fresh. I mean, a lot of the story is the same, some of the characters have changed, but it's just a really good as its own thing.
Okay, your Finnish readership is of course very, you know, proud that you have written about a boy from Finnish, and you know that the Santa Claus is from Finland and so on, because, you know, not everybody does. So on behalf of your Finnish readers, thank you, Matt Haig.
Thank you so much. That was lovely. I love that. Thank you.